What's going on, everybody? This is the second episode of Agitprop, short for agitative propaganda. We are live from the den of sin, the epicenter of cultural imperialism. Of course, I'm referring to sunny Los Angeles, California. I'm your host, Hasan Piker. This is going to be an episode where I finally do some hosting, and I'm genuinely terrified. I'm just letting you guys know ahead of time that it might be kind of bad, okay? I'm only used to doing this on Twitch, where I get to do whatever I want, and it's not as structured as an actual show. The second episode is actually gonna be jam-packed with a lot of goodies. I'm really excited to talk to you guys about Agitprop, what the word means. That's gonna be the first segment, and then I will be joined by one of my favorite people on the internet, good friend of mine, Felix Biederman, host of the very successful Chapo Trap House podcast, a New York Times best-selling author. What crazy, a pog champ, a guy who is basically sniper Chris Kyle, 3 tours in Fortnite, just an absolute lad. We're gonna be talking to him about Russiagate, the conspiracy mindset of liberal boomers, the conspiracy mindset of Republican boomers. Then we're also going to talk about my favorite, not conspiracy, real situation, Epstein Gate, the death or potentially murder of Jeffrey Epstein, the billionaire pedophile. And finally, we're gonna wrap it up with an article on Colette magazine, which is my favorite race science phrenology magazine out there, and how they got owned by a real leftist who was posing as a fake leftist. So without further ado, let's get started. I'll also be doing something very different that other people don't do, that my producer is going to freak out over right now, but I will be going through the live comments. So that's why I like to do a little bit more engagement than other shows, so I'm just letting you guys know I will be checking all of the terrible things you're saying in the comment section. All right, so let's get started. What is Agitprop? What is Agitprop, Hasan? Why did you name the show Agitprop? So let's go to the first graphic here. Agitprop, abbreviated from Russian agitatsiya propaganda, agitation propaganda, is a political strategy in which the techniques of agitation and propaganda are used to influence and mobilize public opinion. Although the strategy is common, both the label and obsession with it were specific to the Marxism practiced by communists in the Soviet Union. Ironically, this is from the Encyclopedia Britannica, which I would consider to be Western imperialist propaganda. But Lenin had some stuff to say about Agitprop in What Is to Be Done in 1902. He said, struggle can also be transformed into agitation. Take the example of a picket line. Basically, it is a form of struggle, but it contains agitation, including slogans on the picket signs. Of course, the picket signs themselves can be transformed into a form of struggle when appropriately used to knock some scab or cop upside the head. And this, in turn, is a form of education for any fellow pigs and low-life scabs in the vicinity. Basically, the short and sweet of it is, there's a lot to be angry about, unless you're Tim Ryan and your campaign slogan is, why are you yelling? But as Bernie Sanders effectively put it, there is a lot to be angry about right now. But unfortunately, I feel like a lot of people in America don't know where to put that anger. They don't know where to transfer that energy because there's not a lot of class consciousness in this country. And I think that that is absolutely deliberate. So this show is basically going to be a leftist take, a more leftist approach to all of the comings and goings, the daily monotony, and sometimes outright brutality of our news cycle. And I will be telling you exactly why the levers in power, or those in positions of power who control us, the real masters, who the real masters are, which I would consider to be capital, and why the system is designed the way that it is to make you feel the way that you do, which is hopeless, senseless, and kind of falling in a vacuum and alienated. So Agitprop was used throughout time, specifically by the USSR. Soviet anti-racism campaigns were essential to the regime's conceptualization on its own political and moral identity. It is hard to think of any other issue where the Soviet Union's moral superiority over its Western opponents was as incontrovertible as when it came to contrasting their respective histories of engagement with Africans and their descendants. So agitative propaganda, especially as a fighting force against the United States, was effectively utilized during the civil rights struggles, early era, like USSR rising. There are numerous American thinkers who have talked about their treatment under the USSR or by by communists, for example. W.E.B. Du Bois, for example, returned from his 1926 tour of the USSR, captivated by the human warmth and racial equality he claimed to observe there. If what I have seen with my own eyes and heard with my ears is Bolshevism, then I am a Bolshevik, he quipped. Now, there was a turn. But even before we get to that turn, when an all-white jury falsely convicted 9 black teenagers of rape in Scottsboro, Alabama in 1931, the USSR's International Red Aid, IRA, organized an international campaign to liberate the Scottsboro boys. Now, this was a perfect example of this, and that's part of the reason why you would see, even during the civil rights struggle in the 60s, that people oftentimes, like Republicans and even some liberals, or the famously called out white moderate, would routinely say commies and also people who are like fighting in the civil rights movement to get out of this country. Communism and the anti-war effort and democratic socialism and the civil rights efforts were intertwined, basically. People, of course, understood that they weren't directly linked to one another, but oftentimes this was regarded as a class struggle where people considered themselves to be perfect allies. Now, this is very similar to what we see in this day and age. But before we get to that, by the 1940s and 50s, the Soviet Union, a country that preached and occasionally practiced the principles of internationalist solidarity, had given to a more traditional nation state dominated by the ethnic Russian majority. At this point, the KGB Agitprop started focusing on both sides of internal conflict that existed in the United States to exploit division in the United States and agitate as best as they could. This is a little bit more similar to what we see during the Russiagate era of Russian propaganda, where both sides of a Black Lives Matter conflict can oftentimes be, our media outlets will talk about Black Lives Matter and how Russians were instigating BLM movements. There was an organization in, I forget which area it was in the United States, where there was a scare propped up by Facebook ads in regards to Muslim immigration. But then on the other side, there was also another agitation happening in regards to Islamophobia in the area and white nationalism. And that's pretty much what started happening in the 60s and 70s. But my main point here is the fact that these issues have not changed. Obviously, even if you don't care about like civil liberties or equality or fighting for equity because you care about your fellow men and women and fellow citizens, then the least you can do is care about it from, I don't know, maybe like a national security perspective, considering the fact that America is basically a powder keg and it's so easily influenced and exploited by foreign adversaries who want to change political outcomes or who want to make us fight amongst ourselves. Why don't we focus on actually solving these issues? That's what I'm here to talk about, basically. Anyway, so let's get to contemporary agitprop. Like the Internet Research Agency, the earlier IRA planned protests, distributed news and political materials, and adopted the rhetoric of American activists, masking the true foreign source of their campaign. Many American observers credited the post-trial wave of protests, some orchestrated by the IRA, others more spontaneous, with pressuring the Alabama Supreme Court to agree to hear the defendants' appeal. Though Southern conservatives typically denounced civil rights activism as communist, the general public understood the Scottsboro campaign in the context of ongoing anti-Jim Crow advocacy, not Soviet interference. So obviously there were still people who considered this to be just regular like civil rights struggle. In the 1960s, just as the propaganda arm of the Soviet Union was highlighting racism in the US, the KGB attempted to discredit Martin Luther King Jr. by portraying him as an Uncle Tom who was secretly receiving government subsidies. Similarly, in 2016, some IRA Twitter accounts mimicked the rhetoric of the Black Lives Matter movement, while others broadcasted right-wing nativist messages. I mentioned this already. Russian trolls even organized the protest and simultaneous counter-protest of the opening of an Islamic center in Houston, taking advantage of American Islamophobia. Now, you might be thinking at this point, Hasan, what is this? Is this pro-Russian propaganda? What are you doing? No, of course not. I would also urge you to look into foreign interference in other nations in their democratic elections in the hands of the US State Department or the CIA. This is something that the United States has been engaging in for a very long time. We're very good at it. The United States' departure from democratic ideals sometimes went much further. The CIA helped overthrow elected leaders in Iran and Guatemala in the 1950s and backed violent coups in several other countries in the 1960s. It plotted assassinations and supported brutal anti-communist governments in Latin America, Africa, and Asia. So we like to think about Russia as a foreign adversary or the USSR as this like totally villainous nation, and it's completely understandable. Part of it is also the Red Scare. Part of it is Western media propaganda. It's easy to scapegoat a foreign adversary and blame them for all of our internal struggles or internal problems. But the reality is we've done much, much worse things all around the world. Obviously, I'm not here to defend the USSR. I'm not a fan of the USSR. But, you know, the United States, not great. Our track record, not exactly stellar when considering the fact that even someone like Elliot Abrams, for example, still has a place in this government trying to facilitate a peaceable transitional government offered to Guaido, who is an American puppet, essentially, who wants to privatize all of Venezuela's extraction industries. This guy was played a significant role in previous administrations in covering up massacres that the United States engaged in. So, you know, we have a lot to blame. We've done a lot of terrible things, okay? Just reminding you guys of that. So, obviously, right now, you know what? Actually, we're gonna get to the break. This is like the background of agitated propaganda. Why we're talking about agitated propaganda here. What I want to do and is basically focus on the real issues that impact Americans on a day-to-day basis and why change is so hard to achieve in this country as it stands currently, and give you a different, perhaps a refreshing perspective on that. But more on that and more on the Russiagate element and the Russiagate hysteria and how we've used it as a scapegoat after we come back from the break. And Felix Biederman will be joining me, so I'm very excited on that as well.
Russia, Vladimir Putin, Russia, hate, Russia, Putin, Russia's, Russia, Moscow, Russian, pro-Russian, the Russians, Moscow, Russia, Putin, Russian against us, Russians, the Russians rush against the US, the Russians, Russian government scheme.
We're back. All right. I don't know if Felix can hear me or not on the other side. There's some issues with the lights. Okay. Can you guys increase his volume a little bit too? I can't really hear him that well in my IFB. God, I hate IFBs. Anyway, I'm your host, Hasan Piker. Joining me is Felix Biederman. Right now, we're going to talk about the Russiagate conspiracy. Felix, this is not like the Twitch streams that you and I have done in the past. You can't curse. I'm just letting you know ahead of time.
Oh yeah, Dan told me I'm being a good boy today.
All right, I can hear him now perfectly. All right, thank God. All right, good stuff. So I'm just gonna also briefly outline some of the things that I wanna talk about in regards to Russiagate. Russiagate has basically become the liberal gluten or the liberal QAnon at a certain point where every single thing was directly tied back to Russian interference or Russia. I think it was a way for everyone to kind of feel better about America and to maintain this identity that America was truly an incredible nation with no faults of its own, and that the only reason why we have a sociopathic, demented man baby such as Donald Trump as president is because of foreign interference and not because the DNC, for example, failed completely and spectacularly, and the Hillary campaign failed on top of that as well, and that the Democratic Party has completely given up on trying to entertain blue-collar votes and openly has admitted it, as Chuck Schumer did in 2016. So really quickly, I want to talk about the way that the media has also covered Russiagate and how the media has used this. Multiple media outlets, including CNN, Slate, Vox, and the New York Times, have produced articles linking Black Lives Matter to the Kremlin, insinuating that the outrage over racist police brutality is another Russian psyop. Others claimed that Russia funded the riots in Ferguson and that Russian trolls promoted the Standing Rock environmental protests. So the media elites are also relatively out of touch, and that's precisely why they have this perspective. Now, I'm not saying that every single person believes that like every single movement is directly related to Russia, but it is definitely a scapegoat that we have used to cover up for all of our personal failures within the Democratic Party and also our personal failures in regards to dealing with systemic inequalities, especially when considering the fact that, we're using a foreign adversary with the GDP that is smaller than Texas, that is presenting this grave threat by buying ads and hacking our ballot reading software instead of addressing the fundamental problems like systemic racism that Russia was able to take advantage of and exploit America, as I've mentioned in the previous segment, as a powder keg. And if you don't care about addressing these issues from the point of view of empathy, the least you can do is care about solving systemic inequalities, as they clearly present a national security threat, since they're a massive opening for Russia and China and any other foreign adversaries to exploit. All right, Felix, so let's hear your thoughts on this. I know you hate this issue. I know you probably didn't want to talk about it, but thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
It's not every day that I get to have a New York Times bestseller on the show, so I'm very excited that you came on. But what do you think about Russiagate?
I mean, no one really cares about it anymore. It's like the vibe I get. I mean, if you only spent your time on Twitter, you would think it's still a going concern. But even then, the fever's died down. I think it died in the minds of a lot of people, even a lot of the diehards on Twitter, when the culmination of it was dragging this senile man, Robert Mueller, in front of Congress every few months to ask, hey, can you arrest the president? And each time him going, no, because he sort of said that towards the middle of the investigation, and then everyone getting mad at him. And, do I think there was a lot of stuff of substance in the Mueller report? Yeah, absolutely. But the fact is the limits of this investigation, the limits of Robert Mueller himself, the limits of what they can actually do, and just sort of hyping this up is there's going to be this huge smoking gun of Trump talking directly to Putin instead of what this thing actually was, which is a bunch of scummy, amoral people being scummy and amoral in every direction, something we kind of already knew. It died in the minds of most people a while ago. I mean, it's still the thing is people point to polls about it. It still polls well to some extent because I mean, the image of this administration and the people around it is scummy and corrupt. But this thing lost a lot of purchase as an election moving issue when it became clear it was more about feeling normal again than anything else.
Yeah, so I want to talk about the details really quickly because you are correct. There are obviously some serious problems that were highlighted in the Mueller report in regards to election meddling and how easily compromised our election security is. But unfortunately, aside from Paul Manafort, who went to jail for just being too hot and enjoying the finer things in life, I don't know, iguana skinned suits and whatever. The only other person that went to jail was Reality Winner after a top secret NSA report detailed Russian hacking efforts days before the 2016 election. Reality Winner famously got 63 months in prison. At the issue in the Winner's case was a document she leaked to a news outlet, The Intercept, of course, which published an article on June 5th, 2017 about a 5-page National Security Agency report that detailed how alleged Russian hackers targeted election vendors with phishing attacks in an attempt to access voter rolls in several states. So she got 63 months in prison, and I'm shocked that most Democrats have not screamed about this, considering how they are the real patriots and the Republicans are actually selling America to foreign adversaries. And there is some truth to that.
They don't like whistleblowers no matter what.
Yeah.
They've made that quite clear.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. Now, there is obviously the serious threat that the Reality Winner exposed and also the Mueller report showed, which was that Russia did hack state databases and voting machine companies. I have a video here really quickly to show you exactly how easy it is to hack one of these machines. So let's take a look at this video right now.
All they have to do, this bad actor, would be to open up this machine by pressing this button right here. When it's off, removing the card reader, removing this, you don't need any tools to do this. Unplugging this, again, you don't need any tools to do this. Turning it on, all you have to do is pick this lock here with a ballpoint pen. Open this up, press the red button, So it's loading with what they call a secure voting terminal right now. And here we're gonna see a couple of error messages, and all you have to do to bypass those error messages is just click cancel and OK. And now I have full admin access under 2 minutes.
And yet just hours after Senate Republicans blocked a vote on a bill to make elections less vulnerable to cyber attacks, the Senate Intelligence Committee released a 67-page report concluding that leading up to the 2016 election, Russians hacked voting machines and registration rolls in all 50 states, and they are likely still doing so. We need voting machines with paper ballot backups, but the Senate report notes that 19 states do not conduct complete post-election audits to compare these ballots to the electronic results. 5 of them do not audit at all. Paper backups mean little if nobody looks at them. Mitch McConnell is personally blocking bills, not allowing House-passed election security and voting reforms bills to be brought up. And Republicans have also blocked efforts by Senate Democrats to push through other election security bills by unanimous consent, including one that would require backup paper ballots and provide election security grants to states, and another that would require campaigns to report offers of illegal foreign assistance to the FBI. This is where you come in, Felix. We're talking about illegal foreign assistance. I know you're a big fan of the Israeli and Saudi regimes in the Middle East.
Best.
Yeah, speaking of foreign interference, of course, I don't know why we always talk about Russian interference or potential Chinese foreign interference, and yet we rarely ever talk about the prevailing influence that MBS has. Being a big round boy, being the big round boy he is, coming to America, getting the red carpet treatment from our press. And now he has a carte blanche approach to being able to chop up even legal permanent residents such as Jamal Khashoggi. He may or may not be CIS's.
Oh my God, I have not even come close to pronouncing that right. I mean, I already knew that, but wow.
Well, I did the Turkish pronunciation.
This is like a Mueller report level stark revelation for me.
Jamal Khashoggi is like the more Turkish way of spelling or pronouncing his name. So don't take my word on it.
All right, can you pull up the Duolingo bird on screen, please?
We can't do that, unfortunately, in the studio. But in any case, yeah. What do you think about all this? I mean, we got Israel like literally writing anti-BDS legislation, which is supposed to be like the most important constitutional right that we have, is freedom of speech, right? You have Donald Trump openly going mask off, admitting that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia can chop up legal permanent resident American journalists, considering that they're buying $10 billion of weapons that then end up, I don't know, turning an entire school bus full of children into glass. Our weapons are doing that in Yemen. So we rarely ever talk about that sort of influence. I don't know why. And there are a number of other issues on top of that in regards to election security. Some of them I just mentioned, that Mitch McConnell and the Republican Party is not really too fond of. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that's the case? Do you have an opinion on this?
Why do I think that we don't talk about like other election interference and security breaches as much? Well, I remember, if you know my history as a person, when I was like 14, I was, very much computer liberal, like a lot of kids my age at the time. I would argue with the like 2 or 3 Bush Republicans on my gaming forum back in like 2003, 2004. And I remember when talking about like Diebold voting machines made you a crank. And, even among like regular Democrats at the time, it kind of made you a crank, which was insane to me. They were, then and now, all voting machines, like insanely easy to tamper with. Insanely. Like as that video shows that you just posted. And it was one of those cases of having like this massive, if you were me in 2004 and you were way more into these ideas of like civic fidelity, you thought that we were so close to fully having that, if it just wasn't for Bush, that you would be totally against these things. Because what is the reasoning for having them? It's like most government contracts like that, where it's like someone's idiot nephew made a type of bad computer and the government has to buy it now. There's really, with a government with like virtually unlimited resources, why wouldn't you just pay people to count the ballots? Obviously, there's human error and human corruption, but it's not as open for malfeasance as these things obviously are. So there are, to people's credit, there are a lot of like Russiagate libs who talk about how bad voting machines are, and I agree with them. But it's another thing. It's like tax software. You're not going to get rid of it.
Yeah.
You're not. Sorry, I should make that more clear. You're not going to. The thing that happens every year where some enterprising young lefty Congress person tries to make it so that the IRS will allow you to do your taxes for free with government software, which, like, why wouldn't that exist? And of course, TurboTax doesn't want it to happen. This is a similar type of deal. It's one of those very boring but very dull, sinister things that allows everything to keep functioning very poorly. As far as the other influence goes, the Mueller report did talk about a lot of scummy Israeli nationals who I guess, tried to pay Donald Trump in capri pants and bad ecstasy, as is, the custom in that country. Don't worry, I can say that. But I think that the cultural focal point remained Russia, because Russia seems like the most other, to our country, right?
And there's a long history of it with the Red Scare and all that. So it's like, I love that. I mean, they even still call Mitch McConnell Moscow Mitch. There's ads that are being taken out, like linking the GOP back to the USSR all around the country, as though this is like an effective strategy of dealing with the Republican Party, which is kind of funny. It kind of is, because apparently Mitch McConnell, who is unshakable in other ways, is genuinely pissed off about the Moscow Mitch link, from what I understand.
Well, yeah, because he's 100,000 years old, and he doesn't care about being called a slime ball with no beliefs or anything, but because he's 100 million years old and remembers the Cold War, this is I guess the worst thing you can call him. So, I mean, it's corny as. Wow, I'm realizing how limited my vocabulary is with these YouTube TOS. It's really corny, but if it makes his day slightly worse, it's fine. I mean, at the end of the day, he's still going to be doing all the things he does, still be exactly as evil forever. Nothing really changes. But hey, if it makes his day worse, that's nice. But I think a lot of the reaction to Trump in general, and a lot of the reaction to this stuff, is just I've talked about it before. You've talked about it. It's a desire to feel normal again. And out of all those countries that are named in their Mueller report, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Israel, whatever, none of them hit that little button in your mind of not normal, of making us not feel normal, I think. Because the cultural image of Russia is just that half of all cars are driven by bears. The most common job is alcoholic who dies. I'm
quite disgusted that you are engaging in Russiophobia on this day, a day after Italophobia ran rampant through our news cycle, with Cuomo being attacked with hate speech. Russia has a robust economy of dashcam video footage. So they are the #1 supplier of live stream fails and dashcam footage. And what is it what's the term of the videos that you'd watch when you were in high school of people getting actually killed in real life?
That's just called snuff films.
Oh, snuff films. Yeah, that was the word I was thinking. Yeah,
a lot of American ones though too. If we're gonna be fair, most snuff films you see are fake.
Oh, really? I didn't.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was a Russiagate level of reveal for me. I thought it was all real. Damn it, Felix.
I went to a little place called Rotten.com.
Okay. A couple things that I wanted to get to really quickly, because you made a really good point. You said that this is for everyone to believe that this is a sinister foreign agent that's changing the American political landscape. single-handedly, and if we were to defeat that foreign adversary, then we could go back to normalcy, and this would be great. And it's basically like the liberal boomer QAnon conspiracy, where like everything I hate is Russiagate, everything I hate is Russia. That is in stark contrast, of course, with the fact that the Republican Party is actively and deliberately engaging with voter suppression at every step of the way, like in Georgia, where the Secretary of State gave himself a narrow victory over Stacey Abrams, or Ron DeSantis, who narrowly defeated Andrew Gillum in the gubernatorial race in Florida, and is now trying to scale back on the recent felon voting restoration that was voted on, which is a very successful ballot measure on that same exact gubernatorial race in Florida, trying to reinstitute a poll tax essentially to felons to stop them from voting again. So this is the kind of like awful stuff that happens all the time. Election fraud in North Carolina, just some examples that I can think of. Voter ID laws that are being struck down by the Supreme Court because these Republicans are literally like emailing each other saying, we really don't want black people to vote. Like that's the only way you can, that's the only way you can catch these people, and they still end up failing.
Right, that cute, cuddly, never Trump Republican that we all hold up as an icon of decency now, Jeb Bush. You know, if you remember what he did in Florida in 2000. I mean, none of this is new. They've always done this. Every guy who's like never gonna run for office again, so he gets out there and says, you know, Donald Trump, cool it with the racism. The guy whose career is essentially over, so he can make $10 million for the rest of his year giving PowerPoints to, you know, Jewel or whatever. They all had a hand in this. They all kind of made their career in this, like Jeb did. And yeah, none of it's a new thing. And again, I want to be fair, like to the normal libs, like they talk about this a lot, but it's something that like, you know, I wish an Obama DOJ had taken on more, right?
You said the Obama DOJ you wish would take this on a little bit more. Yeah, that would have been incredible.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So,
but you know, at the end of all, like the thing I've always thought about Russiagate and all this is, to some extent, if Russia say it's like 100% true, and they just destroyed us, you kind of have to say like game at that point, right?
Yeah.
We're the biggest, baddest empire ever, yet we have the most principles ever, we have the best constitution ever, and the Radio Shack took us out.
Yeah, Radio Shack took us out, and we're not doing anything about it, which is quite shocking. Something that I've never been able to understand is that the same people that argue that Trump is a Putin puppet are also resisting calls for Trump's impeachment. If Trump is a Putin agent, which I don't believe he is, and he's eroding our norms, checks and balances, which I do believe he is, then why aren't Democrats doing anything about it? It's really strange. But let's move on to another case of conspiracies here. I want to talk about Epstein. I don't know if this is something, I don't know if this is a touchy subject for you or not.
Why would it be? What are you?
Well, it's because everyone on the left and right of the on the political spectrum on the internet has been only talking about this for the past couple of days. I did a 7-hour deep dive into like every single detail of the Epstein case. From the first like sweetheart plea bargain all the way to Jeffrey Epstein's like death, untimely death.
Tonight, law enforcement officials say Epstein is expected to be charged with 2 federal counts related to sex trafficking. His alleged crimes taking place from 2002 to 2005 against dozens of underage girls at his New York City and Palm Beach, Florida home. Jeffrey Epstein made his millions on Wall Street, counting among his high-powered friends Britain's Prince Andrew, former President Bill Clinton, even rubbing shoulders in the 90s with Donald Trump.
And no one really knows how Epstein made all of his money. He operated a hedge fund with no quants or interns, no footprint of a trading operation, and no list of people who worked with him or for him. Despite having such high-profile friends, not much is known about Epstein's wealth or even his assets, which include a $77 million New York City mansion, a private jet, and a private island where this weird temple exists. Another widespread speculation is that Epstein is with intelligence. And these aren't my words. These are the words of former Labor Secretary Alexander Acosta, who gave Epstein his original sweetheart plea deal, which ended up hiding co-conspirators and ending a federal investigation that was also being conducted on Epstein at the time. Acosta was asked about his Epstein deal during his confirmation and reportedly said Epstein was above his pay grade and that Epstein belonged to intelligence. Suspicious. Now, the timeline of his death is that Epstein initially had been in general population at the MCC, Manhattan Correctional Center, where he'd been targeted for extortion as a wealthy pedophile. Epstein then was transferred into a cell with a roommate in the special housing unit. That roommate was Nicholas Tartaglione, a gigantic allegedly steroid-addled New York crooked cop.
I don't want you to defame this man.
Yeah. I would not want to defame this man who is on trial for brutally executing 4 potential cartel gang members after a potential cocaine deal went south, and then he went and buried them in his backyard, and his neighbors were thrown off by the smell. And I believe they could like see pieces and bits and pieces of a guy just like literally digging his backyard to dump these bodies in there. I don't know. Nicholas is just a walking, talking case of a bad cop. And while he was rooming with Epstein attempted to commit suicide under suspicious circumstances, and he was placed on suicide watch after he was found in his cell in that unit in medical distress on July 23rd with apparent bruising on his neck. Epstein was then, weirdly enough, taken off of suicide watch 6 days later. 11 days after that, thousands of documents from a civil suit are released that provide lurid accounts of Epstein sexually abusing countless girls, linking Jeffrey Epstein and other wealthy people, even including a potential prime minister, Prince Andrew, to all of these child molestation that was occurring under Epstein's watch. And then on the night of August 9th, in a protective housing unit of the federal jail in Lower Manhattan, Jeffrey Epstein, the financier accused of trafficking girls for sex, is alone in a cell. Only 11 days after he had been taken off suicide watch, he was supposed to have been checked by 2 guards in the protective housing unit every 30 minutes, but that procedure was not followed on that night. Weird. Epstein is found dead in his cell in what authorities are calling a suicide. So here we are. Let's hear it. What's your take, Felix? What's going on?
That's a hilarious way to ask that question. What's your take?
I mean, do you think Jeffrey Epstein was murdered, or do you think he actually committed suicide because of all the cyberbullying that he was subjected to?
I think to quote Adam 22, was he an abuser to some extent? Maybe, probably. But okay, so I mean, no one knows, right? But okay, so yeah, let's look at it. House of Tartaglione, who had a cell phone in there days before he was Epstein's cellmate, with calls going out to one of the wealthiest counties in New York, in America, actually. He's taken off suicide watch, all this stuff. And a lot of this stuff you can chalk up to just like MCC incompetence, which is, well documented. But there's just so much. I do want to touch back when you talked about Acosta. It wasn't his idea for the deal. He was just a flunky. He's Philip Green from Casino. He thought, he was USADA because he was so smart. But yeah, what actually happened was he was told Epstein belonged to intelligence.
Yeah.
And you want to know who signed off on that deal? The hero, Robert Mueller. You really, can't make it up.
Well, yeah.
But
a lot of these are George W. Bush era guys. I mean, I think Acosta was appointed by George W. Bush to Florida. He was a rising star and a great prosecutor who did the exact opposite of what a great prosecutor would normally do when he has a slam dunk, high profile, wealthy pedophile sex ring case in his hands, where all he needs to do is lock this guy up for the rest of his life. Casually just decides, let's not make a big stink of this. Let's not even let the witnesses know that a plea bargaining deal is taking place. Let's not let the media know. the opposite of what a prosecutor would do in that circumstance. And then, as you mentioned, yes, the Trump administration, and this is secondhand accounts from the Daily Beast, and I can't, for some weird reason, find any other place where this has been reported on. But when the Trump administration was like, "So what's up with this Epstein stuff? Like, why'd you give him a slap on the wrist?" He was just like, "I was told that he was intelligence. I was told to drop it, that it was above my pay grade, and then we just casually decided to forget about that, and no one brought it up in the hearings." When he was being appointed, except for like one time when I think Tim Kaine asked the question and then quickly moved away from it. So
Me amo Tim Kaine.
Yeah.
Welcome to the resistance. Yeah, no. So I will say, okay, so like the day it happened, I was already like set to be in a bad mood that day because I woke up at 3. Like I was trying to reset my sleep cycle and screwed up my alarm clocks. You're never gonna be happy waking up at 3. I don't care what you wake up to, right? But so it like immediately depressed me, not because he was dead, but because it was like, okay, if they did just kill him, right? It feels like them just going like, yeah, what are you gonna do about it, right? Like that's how it feels. Is that how it felt to you?
I think that look, I called this a while ago, okay? I called this the first time a suicide attempt was made, or an attempt on his life was made. And I think everyone else on the internet called this as well. It is just it is remarkable to me that people are so like willing and able to chalk this up to like just our federal prison system sucks, I guess, when so many suspicious circumstances allowed this to happen. Like the fact that he was the fact that he was taken off of suicide watch, the fact that sources close to Epstein said that he was in good spirits leading up to this. I don't know why he would be in good spirits, but that's what the Washington Post is reporting.
He'd been listening to Jesse. He's getting over suicidal
He's
tendencies.
doing self-care.
He apparently,
apparently he was doing self-care. You know, radical self-care. But it's just like. It's just remarkable to me that even the people that were supposed to be there at the time, like monitoring him every 30 minutes, were not doing it that night. And the MCC is just like, yeah, or I think it's the Federal Prison Bureau basically said, yeah, it's because these guys are on overtime. Like it just sucks. The correctionals union. Members also mentioned that it's just these are the conditions. Like we're not getting paid enough, and that we just didn't have the appropriate amount of staff. I think they were on like overtime 5 nights in a row, so they just like decided to not check in on the most important like federal asset in this like ongoing international pedophile sex ring case. The only person outside of like his weird CDs that they found in his apartment, the only person who knows the truth and could potentially deliver us some form of justice and finally give us some answers on whether or not Alex Jones or the QAnon people, which I would consider to be op, and maybe even potentially backed by the CIA to cause disinformation campaigns to get us off the trail of like an actual international pedophile conspiracy. All of this, like we have no answers now. The criminal case is gone, and it's insanely frustrating to me, and it's insanely suspicious, and it's weird that people were so quick to be like, "Yep, that's it. It's suicide. Oops." You hate to see it.
So yeah, it sounds like you're saying a lot of things I was feeling that day, and a lot of other people were, and I do want to say something. I don't know if it's necessarily optimism, but all right, I'll put it this way. How do you think this would have gone like 30 years ago? Like, are you familiar with Gary Webb?
No, I'm not familiar with Gary Webb. I'd love for you to elaborate on it, but I don't think that it would have gone.
Broke the story of like CIA cocaine trafficking.
Yeah.
And he was, quote unquote, suicided. I mean, I don't know on that one either. But my point is that a lot of things like this happened a while ago. back when America seemed more invulnerable, when we were more capable of just knocking countries over than we are now, when there was a lot less internal rot than we have now. But looking up at this now, it's like you're looking up at this giant behemoth. It's like when you stand underneath a skyscraper and you stare straight up, it towers over you. If they really did kill this guy, your immediate thought is like, what can anyone do? How can you do anything? But when you take a step back a bit and you get some context, you widen your field of view. You do see this sort of, and I guess this connects to Russiagate a little bit. You see this nation that never got to be that removed from its original sin, so it drove us insane. We turned into an empire so quickly after we were founded. It pretty much unprecedented throughout history. The only thing I could compare that, started and then became an empire as quick would be Islam, right? That would be it. It's incomparable. So we have this insanity that a lot of other countries have. They were around for thousands of years, and then they became globe-spanning empires. And then, like all empires, they fell, they collapsed, and then they, maybe they went the way of the Netherlands, and their thing became like, trying to control pre-existing relationships with trade and shoring up, a lot of social welfare things they didn't have, and just trying to live off the bounty of their former empire, similar to the UK, similar to a lot of places. Or they became like Turkey, just driven so insane by the collapse that they tried to recapture it forever. And, they're alternating between cycles of prodigious growth and horrible turmoil. And I think it's very clear we're at a crossroads for like that, right? We couldn't knock over anyone, regardless what you think of these regimes. It's quite obviously, like, at some point America wanted to institute regime change on, both Syria and Venezuela. Yeah. I don't think America's wanted to do regime change in Syria for a few years now. I think like that ship sailed a while ago, but we just weren't able to really get anything going. We just weren't able to do it. Do you think George H.W. Bush would have had that problem? Do you think Reagan would have? Do you think Clinton would have? Bill Clinton? Probably not. Yeah. And you do see this, when you take a step back, you see this like diminishing behemoth. And I think just because something's diminishing, it doesn't make like the worst people in power any less, awful. In fact, it probably makes them panic. And I feel like a lot of this is panic. This is a weird source of solve to get from this time. But there was a Taleb quote that I read. I like Taleb. I know you do, but I like him, and I think he's actually very smart. But it was something, he's obsessed with the classics. They're the most anti-fragile thing is to do things that have been around for thousands of years, right? And it was something about how the Stoic man will be involved with politics and then quickly leave, because the state, the empire, whatever you want to call it, is so corrupt it will self-collapse. And that's obviously not a great thing to hear if you're struggling day to day. Just wait for it to collapse. But I think that's the timeline we're looking at now.
But that's the leadership, right? Like you're talking about the leadership, or do you think that this is like a feeling that everyday Americans, this is an anxiety that is like mirrored in the lives of everyday Americans, or do you think that like we feel a different set of anxiety and animosity towards one another as a consequence of like a lack of opportunity and all the alienation that we feel, rather than just the fact that like we can't even do regime change in Venezuela? Like I can see the wonk class and the DC elites and the wealthy people feeling a sense of insecurity with the upcoming realization that the U.S. empire is on its last leg and virtually crippled in comparison to what it was even 10 years ago or 20 years ago. But on top of that, I think like people feel hopeless and just completely just given up with our like political institutions.
But that's been going on for a while though. Like, people given up on politics like since Reagan, really. I mean, I don't. But the thing is, neither of us really know. I think this is one of the like catch-22s of the job you and I have. I think you work a lot harder than I do, but it's not a normal job, right? Normal jobs suck. We don't have that.
True. I agree.
For the most part, we can sort of determine our own destiny. We answer. I really answered to no one. I set my own. I have no. My point is,
you're like Bagel Boss. You're like Bagel Boss. You're not my God. You're not my father. You're not my boss.
Right. So my point is that you and I and people like us, and to a lesser extent, well, maybe to a similar extent, like people who sort of set the tone in media, you could be as good of a person, however good of a person you are in your life, to your friends, to your family, to strangers, to whatever. But if you are not living something close to the tensions of a normal life, which we don't at all, you do lose an empathy. And my point there is, like, we really don't know what a normal person thinks right now. We have no idea. We can't get inside their head. We're so far removed from that life. But I try to like keep a bead on normal people. I know a lot of them. I play games with a lot of them. And there is like, you know, a general malaise. There's more than anything, there's a loneliness. That's huge.
Yeah.
But I think maybe there is a small subconscious baseline feeling of defeat.
Yeah.
But the thing is, that's not me being definitely like positive or optimistic towards the future, because I don't know what that results in. I don't know if we become Turkey. I don't know if we become like, you know, one of these countries. It's still like bad in every way a country is, but, you know, has a basic social democratic safety net. I don't know what happens. I don't know what comes next. It's probably going to be,
I think it's worse.
Anything we've ever seen, both good and bad, because there's no precedent for this.
Yeah, I think we go worse than that. I think we go back to like rise of fans of the Weimar Republic in Nazi Germany days in America, considering that fascism is a much more effective way of controlling the population, and also it fits perfectly with a white supremacist ideology that America was built upon. So that kind of like weird spiritual, mythological understanding of like whiteness and this concept is something that I feel like a lot of alienated young men long for. And while America is incredibly diverse, I think that's like substituted itself to maybe like an American nationalism that will look a little bit more unique than the fascist states that we've seen in the past. But right. I do think that that's where we're headed down, unless we have modest social democratic reforms and a couple W's on the board. But we're ending on that note. Felix, thank you so much for coming. We're running out of time. I'm Hasan Piker. Felix, can you give us where we can find you?
Chapo Trap House on Twitch.tv. Chapo Trap House on SoundCloud. That's really all. I don't do much else anymore, to be honest with you.
All right. Well, Felix, thank you once again for coming on.
My pleasure.
You're awesome. And
you are too,
brilliant.
my friend.
Oh well, I try. Let's do
the Twitch thing sometime soon. I want to talk about like streamers abusing their dogs. This is
yeah, we can do that. Talk about alinity.
This is a good time though. But yeah, next time we do this, can we just go back to being really stupid?
Yeah, I'm down. I mean, that's why I do a Twitch stream, which is very different, and you can find that at twitch.tv/Hasanabi. Speaking of which, the second 1 hour show is going to be behind a paywall for members only at tyt.com/agitprop. If you go to tyt.com/agitprop and join the TYT membership, it's only $5 a month. you will be able to see the second 1 hour conversation behind a paywall on Friday. It will be shot around this hour as well, probably at 12 p.m. or 12:30. So that is all. I have no sign off yet, but I'm Hasan Piker, and I hope you enjoyed this. And write to TYT and subscribe and become a member and do all the fun stuff. Okay, have a good one, everybody.